In the shadows of America's most exclusive halls, away from public scrutiny, two brothers quietly pull the strings of power. Their fortune is bigger than that of the Al Saud family or the Ambani family. They are a masterclass in secretly dominating not only business, but also politics.
Soon the first presidential contest will take place, and I, for one, cannot wait to see who the Koch brothers pick.
Through a network of secretive meetings and political influence, they've managed to tilt America's democracy in their favor, pushing an agenda that benefits them and their allies.
Attendees at Koch meetings, held twice a year, are sworn to secrecy.
The Koch brothers follow a typical billionaire's playbook on building and maintaining power, but people are starting to notice their agenda.
I don't admire the Koch brothers. I'm not against people who make money, that's fine. But what they do with their money isn't fine with me.
The Koch brothers have been accused of trying to buy American democracy.
They are interested in using the money they make to buy a political system that allows them to become dominant players in the shaping of the country.
This is the story of two billionaires and their business empire quietly steering the future of a nation.
And if you try to raise our taxes and trample on our liberties, we're either going to beat you or make your life miserable.
In 1900, Fred Koch is born. It seems like he has a very special instinct. An instinct that tells him where the money is at. Because at 17, Fred attends MIT and graduates with a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. And when an American oil brand comes calling, he drops everything to work at this prestigious organization. In the course of his work, he meets with a former MIT classmate and close friend, P.C. Keith, and he starts forming a plan that shows his real character.
He had great values. I mean, he was Dutch, and one of his favorite sayings was, "You can tell the Dutch, but you can't tell them much."
Keith and his partner have an oil company. They agree to let in Fred Koch as the third owner, renaming the company to Keith Winkler Koch Engineering. When the owner Keith leaves the company eventually, Fred goes for the power grab. He assumes half ownership of the company, changing the name to Winkler Koch Engineering. They begin expanding their operations, with Fred working on an invention that would not only revolutionize the oil industry, but also enrage the big players. Their product is a thermal cracking apparatus that they sell to oil refining companies in America. If their invention goes through, it means small companies with less capital will be able to produce more oil products from their small crude oil reservoirs, allowing them to compete with the major oil producers. But there's no happy end. The big companies sue him. They claim Fred's invention, created by Louis Winkler, was a knockoff of Universal Oil Products. What follows are 44 different lawsuits against Koch that paralyze the Winkler Koch Engineering Company and almost drive them to bankruptcy. But a hungry man is an angry man, and soon American oil companies will realize they are dealing with a ruthless lion. Frustrated by the endless legal tussles at home that block him from selling his tech in the US, Fred hatches up a plan. If Americans will not appreciate his work and his technology, he'll take it where it's needed. This plan includes moving to a country that doesn't give a damn about patent and intellectual rights. A country considered by many America's #1 enemy. His host,
Разрешите выразить благодарность от имени нашего съезда.
Between 1929 and 1932, Winkler Koch supports the Kremlin and trains Bolshevik engineers to help Stalin's regime set up 15 modern oil refineries. And no sooner has he done his job than Stalin brutally purges several of Koch's Soviet colleagues. Of course, Koch gets a huge pat on the back, $5 million. But no amount of money can change his mind about communism and socialism at this point. The horrors he sees in the Soviet Union drive him to believe that big government, if left unchecked, will eat its own people. Startups, YouTube channels, oil companies, you always need investment if you want to go big. With Stalin's check, his company now has the much needed funds to expand into Europe and surrounding areas. So he starts pursuing other European markets and establishing refineries for them. In 1934, he makes another deal with the devil.
Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
He enters into a partnership with the Third Reich under Hitler. Fred helps them build the third largest oil refinery, a project Adolf Hitler personally approves. The facility produces hundreds of thousands of gallons of high-octane fuel used in the Holocaust as well as the Second World War. After the war and death of Hitler, the Cold War begins and Fred Koch is forced to go back home. But he isn't going home alone. Apart from the stash of cash he's accumulated in Europe, he's carrying with him a human souvenir, a person he will charge with the responsibility of raising his 4 sons while he's away. He goes home and finds all the 44 suits against him and his company have been dismissed, allowing him to expand into the American oil industry. Thanks to Stalin, his strong disdain for communism is irrefutable. He vows to squash similar advances in the American political scene, even writing a book entitled A Businessman Looks at Communism. And it's at this point that the Koch family's political views are forever altered. Soon, they will go on to infiltrate the American government.
I grew up on an experimental farm. My father was an entrepreneur, really more of an inventor than an entrepreneur. He called himself a half-baked chemist. So we lived on this farm where he experimented with different animals, with feed, with breeding, and so on, always trying to find ways to improve results. He told me that he didn't want me to be a country club bum.
Fred Koch is a no-nonsense father. He believes in spare the rod and spoil the child. He's the kind of father that teaches his children to swim by throwing them into the pool and walking away. He's effective.
And I was no different with my chores, so I was always in trouble with my father and got plenty of punishment. He was good on the punishment side.
When he's home, the house becomes a miniature kingdom, with him on the Iron Throne. So when his sons are born, they meet a staunch conservative father who dictates their every move. However, he's almost always outside the country. So the work of parenting is delegated to his socialite wife and the German nanny he brought back with him. But she's not your typical nanny. She's a devout Hitler fan, so much so that when Germany invades France, she quits her job and goes back to Germany to celebrate with Hitler. Thanks to her, the Koch brothers grow up with stories of Adolf Hitler, admiring his leadership skills and even borrowing a few leaves on how to tame the public. Skills they will put into good use much later when running the Koch empire. By 1958, Fred Koch had successfully secured the family fortune thanks to proceeds from his work with Stalin and Hitler. He goes on to buy 2 refining companies. These 2 are what later give birth to Koch Industries under the leadership of Charles Koch. But before then, Fred Koch must first establish who will succeed him at his fiercely growing company. And it won't be his firstborn son, certainly not when he doesn't follow in his footsteps. By 1940, he has 4 sons, 2 brothers, and 1 pair of twins. And this is when a succession-like drama starts to unfold in real life. But before we deconstruct the power dynamics at play and how one man managed to rise above them all, let me tell you about a different kind of power shift happening right now in the world of video creation. Remember when OpenAI announced Sora and promised to change video creation forever? Well, that future is still in the future, but there's a game changer that's about to hit the market in just weeks. NVIDIA AI V3. This isn't just another tool, it's like having Hollywood on your laptop. For example, want to make a 1-minute video of the story of a robot in a cyberpunk setting that wants to escape the Matrix? This video was created with that exact prompt. There's also an edit command box where you can add commands like edit the voice and make it sound like someone else, while others are still selling promises. NVIDIA is delivering real results. With just text prompts, you can create complete videos that bring your ideas to life. Whether you're explaining market dynamics or telling compelling stories, NVIDIA AI V3 puts you in the director's seat. And unlike other tools that might launch someday, NVIDIA V3 will be in your hands within weeks. It's the real deal. Want to be ahead of the curve? Click the link in the description to try their current version for free with paid plans starting at $20 per month and use my code to get double the video creation minutes in your first month. Now, back to our Koch brothers story where the power dynamics are about to shift dramatically. Charles enters the world already crowned an heir. His father believes he was too soft on the firstborn and therefore Charles will not have it easy.
I was born, for whatever reason, a contrarian. I was a bit of a troublemaker. Matter of fact, years later I asked my father, I said, "Pop, why were you so much tougher on me than my younger brothers?" He said, "Son, you plumb wore me out."
Even before Charles can speak his first words, he's already buried in piles of chores and responsibilities.
He announced to me early that he didn't want me to be a country club bum. He wanted me to amount to something. So he had me work in all my spare time, starting at age 6. This is hard to believe, but we have photographs of me doing it.
This doesn't sit well with Charles. He feels like he's being picked on, and when he shows signs of rebellion, he's shipped off to a military school and dumped there.
I mean, by the time I graduated from high school, I'd been to 8 schools. I wasn't happy. I didn't do well, other than I always did well in math and science, but other things, I was bored and unhappy.
This is enough to convince Charles that the only way he will live in peace is if he follows in his father's footsteps, and he does so diligently. First, he pursues the same academic interests like his father and graduates from MIT with a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering.
It was really when I came back in 1961. It was after that, which was a long way after the 3rd grade. I graduated from MIT and worked for a consulting company for a few years. And my father got me to come back by saying his health was poor and he didn't have long to live and the company wasn't in good shape. So either I had to come back to run it. It was a small company then. We had 2 businesses. One was a crude oil gathering system in Oklahoma and another was making internals for fractionating towers, which provide liquid separation, purification, and refineries and chemical plants. And those were our two businesses. I knew the reason I went to MIT is the language was math rather than English. And I was so much better at math than English that I thought I'd have a better chance of succeeding there. And so I started taking different courses, and I took so many that I couldn't get a degree in any specific subject, so I got it in general engineering. And then I said, well, I need something more specific. So I thought nuclear was the wave of the future, and I would have entrepreneurial opportunities in the future from that.
Yet, instead of joining his dad at his company, he goes to work for another company as an engineering consultant. Dad is disappointed.
The first time he asked me, I said, Pop, no, I got my career ideas and I want to be independent. And so he called me back and he said, son, As you know, my health is poor. It's so poor that I'm not really able to lead the company anymore, and it's not doing well, and I don't have long to live. So either you come back to run it, or I'll sell it.
Following their father's demise, the three brothers get 20% share each of the company, while the firstborn son inherits only 14%.
I found this in my father's safety deposit box after he died in 1967. And he wrote a letter that contained a fabulous message to us. And it said, in part, when you're 21, you will receive what seems to be a large sum of money.
Charles assumes full control, being the oldest and most qualified one of the other three.
I knew it, and that was when I first came back with the company. The first thing my father told me is, son, I hope your first deal is a loser. Otherwise, you'll think you're a lot smarter than you are. And I didn't disappoint him.
But not everyone is happy with this, especially the firstborn. Obviously, he will later team up with the lastborn and bury Charles in a litany of lawsuits, even plotting a hostile takeover of the company. In the meantime, David and Charles are best friends. So naturally, David follows in the footsteps of Charles. And when he graduates with a chemical engineering degree at MIT, he comes back and takes up a leadership position in the company as the president of the board. He will soon go on to run for vice president under a Libertarian Party ticket and fail miserably. But for now, the two have an empire to build.
We have two main businesses. One was a crude oil gathering system in southern Oklahoma, and another was a company that designed and made internals for distillation columns for refineries and chemical plants.
With two oil refining companies, a network of pipelines, multiple ranches, and an engineering company, it's cumbersome to run them. So Charles' first move as a CEO involves consolidating these companies into one company that he renames Koch Industries, a name as inconspicuous as the company itself. The second big move that Charles makes is one that firmly entrenches their success in the oil industry. You see, Charles' father had bought some minority shares in the Great Northern Oil Company that owns Pine Bend Refinery in Minnesota.
What Abraham Maslow said, that if you aren't fully developing your capabilities and realizing your potential, no matter how successful you are outwardly, you will be deeply unhappy. And that's where I was. So I said, I gotta find something.
Being a detail-oriented analyst, Charles spots it as a potential gold mine. He swiftly buys out all the other shareholders for a ridiculously low price, considering what is about to come. Why would he throw all that money at a seemingly modest oil refining company? Well, for starters, almost all of its oil comes from Canada. Why that's a big deal? Congress has just passed a law that prevents corporations from importing all foreign oil. All oil except from Canada. But Canadian oil has a problem. It is sour and requires a different refining process that only 4 refineries in the whole country are capable of. Yet Charles loves Canadian oil. Why? By now, you probably already know what makes his new refinery so attractive. It can process sour oil. The new law makes demand shoot up, and due to the very limited competition, the refinery quickly becomes a money printer for Koch Industries. In 1981, Pine Bend Refinery becomes the largest source of Koch Industries' profits and continues to be the family cash cow several decades later. Charles has learned how important politics are in his line of business and is already making his next move. It involves President Richard Nixon and his new bill with policies aimed at protecting the environment.
During the past 3 years, we have made a good start. We have passed new laws to protect the environment, and we have mobilized the power of public concern. But there is much yet to be done.
Out of all things, this bill will help the Kochs protect and expand their oil empire for decades. It puts a cap on the amount of emissions oil refineries can emit, and if they exceed the legal limit, they have to pay credits to state government. Sounds great, right? However, there's an intentional loophole. The law only applies to new oil refineries as from 1970, and Koch Industries is nowhere near new. So for the next 5 decades, Koch Industries will continue continue emitting pollutants into the environment freely with no cap, while new companies must deal with a legal limit. A masterclass in building power. This new bill puts Koch Industries as a leading producer of crude oil and furthermore makes them the largest supplier of oil for the state of Minnesota to date. But as they say, money is insatiable and Charles can't seem to get enough of it. Using this new money, he starts expanding the company aggressively, buying oil refineries, barges, and tracking companies. This leads to the creation of Koch Oil, a branch of Koch Industries. Koch Oil's competitive advantage is so big that even their biggest competitors, Chevron and Exxon, have to use their services to transport their oil from the wells. But it's the next big purchase that solidifies Charles as a titan of the oil industry. While going through his research looking for his next investment, he comes across some overlooked information about a new oil refinery in Corpus Christi, Texas. At face value, there's nothing special about this new refinery, but Charles sees what no one else sees. This new oil refinery has the necessary equipment required to produce a special material, paraxylene, whose demand is about to shoot up. Paraxylene is needed in the manufacture of PET, a kind of plastic that would become a darling for manufacturers. So he buys the refinery for $265 million and doubles the production of paraxylene. For the next 2 decades, he grows the company from $250 million in yearly sales and 650 employees to a corporate Goliath with $115 billion in annual revenue and a presence in 60 countries. They are now a conglomerate with tentacles spreading almost to all sectors of the economy. This $100 billion mammoth has even been nicknamed the Kochtopus. But their success wasn't a smooth sail. Behind the scenes and high-end social events is a gruesome legal battle threatening to tear the company apart. I know one of the reasons I get so many spam texts and calls is because big companies can't keep our data safe. So what can you do to protect yourself? I use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura will alert me if they find my phone number or any other sensitive information has been compromised. And brethren, they give me fast fraud alerts if anyone tries to use that data to access my credit or bank accounts. Aura does so much more to keep me and my friends and family safe too. I also get things like transaction monitoring, a VPN, antivirus, password manager, parental controls that I never need, and identity theft insurance. I get this all in one app at one affordable price. I can also get their AI-powered call assistant that will pick up unknown calls on my behalf to screen them for spam or scams. The AI forwards legitimate calls to me so I don't miss appointments, deliveries, and emergencies. And it protects me from harmful text messages by filtering out known spam numbers and scanning links in the message for phishing threats. To be honest, I never really cared about this, but the older I get, the more I realize I should not leave myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches. And if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/megalomedia and try your first 2 weeks for free. Also linked, of course, in the description below. In June 1983, after a bitter legal and boardroom battle, the stakes of Frederick and Bill are bought out for $1.1 billion and Charles and David Koch become majority owners of the company. But the other two brothers feel cheated. They claim that at the time, Koch Industries failed to disclose some of their assets, lowering the stock value. In short, they want more, and if they don't get it, they will go down with the company, even if it means backstabbing their brothers. What follows are 15 years of endless court battles, where the firstborn and lastborn want to take over the company. They even launch a campaign to force Koch Industries to go public. But Charles and David prevail, thanks in part to their mother, loyal board members, and Charles' success in running the company. However, the damage is done. Charles never speaks to Bill again, and even at their mother's funeral, they stand far apart from each other. Because when money is involved, blood stops being thicker than water. With the dust settled, Charles and David embark on a campaign to limit government powers on business enterprises, with David even running for vice president and pouring millions of dollars in political campaigns.
I think the fact that the Koch brothers are trying to take away minimum wage is ridiculous.
Sí, el salario mínimo, con el salario mínimo tú vives al día y aparte de que vives al día siempre estás endeudada.
To the Koch brothers, why don't you just leave us alone?
Charles doesn't just inherit his father's company, he inherits his father's political ideologies, becoming the national leader of the John Burke Society, an organization hell-bent on promoting favorable tax policies for corporations, reducing government powers on businesses, and promoting free market policies.
And if you try to raise our taxes and trample on our liberties, we're either going to beat you or make your life miserable.
To them, social politics are a precursor of communism, and they would rather die than see that happen.
We oppose all subsidies, all restrictions on competition, innovation, or providing opportunities to people who start with nothing.
And that's why, twice every year, they secretly meet up in the woods, far from the world, and plot the political trajectory of the country. In these meetings, they blatantly discuss how they will stop certain politicians from keeping their seats. Not only that, but they are involved in bidding wars on who will donate the most amount of money for the Republican Party course.
What I want to do is recognize not all of our great partners, but those partners who have given more than $1 million over the last 12 months.
But even more than that, these brothers use their wealth to promote racial segregation in schools.
We went to a gunfight with knives.
The heated race is over.
Justice! When do we want now?
And don't make any mistake about it. Your plan that you're putting forth today will resegregate the schools.
We had no idea what the stakes were.
In one election, they now have the majority needed to change the way students are assigned to school.
They believe black people are communist puppets and should not be allowed anywhere near the government. This disdain will drive them to launch the most expensive Republican campaign against President Obama, donating a whopping $400 million to Mitt Romney's candidacy in the 2012 elections.
They will say that they are just simply purely interested in these kinds of politics for philosophical kinds of reasons, but the politics they favor also help their business interests.
To do is destroy Social Security, because Social Security is a federal government program that has been enormously successful.
But unlike their father, who hated publicity and scrupulously guarded the family's privacy, these two brothers' activism begins pulling the public's attention. Famously, when they lobbied for a union-free environment.
They are behind introducing legislation which rob public sector workers of collective bargaining, right to work initiatives where they are trying to convince folks that it's better to live in a union-free environment.
Also, some of their unscrupulous dealings begin to surface when they stole native Indians' oil reservoirs and underreported their harvests, or when they secretly pump more than 1 million gallons of wastewater contaminated with ammonia onto the ground, or the 17,000 gallons of crude oil spilled near Austin, Texas. Their Americans for Prosperity advocacy group is especially notorious for coercing politicians and members of the public to oppose some parliament bills.
5 years ago, my brother Charles and I provided the funds to start the Americans for Prosperity.
Today, Americans for Prosperity, AFP, has 33 state chapters and claims to have close to 2 million members.
And not even the law can stop them. They already sponsored a bill that lifts off all limits to NGOs' donations, allowing them to donate to AFP limitlessly. And that was on top of another law that protects charities and NGOs from reporting their source of funding. So now AFP has all this money that they can throw at anyone and make them do their bidding. And who doesn't love money? Even big political bigwigs will bow down when enough money is dangled in front of them. Their mission is one: to stop social government policies that promote equality, employment for poor people, pollution prevention, and any laws that lower their profits.
They've created a web of influence that stretches from state capitals all the way to Congress.
It is estimated that the Koch brothers have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in their activism courses, and it's not about to stop anytime soon, not until everyone in the government answers to them.
How much money would you estimate that you and your brother have spent on American politics?
Well, I can tell you what it was last year. But including what we raised. We raised last year $300 million, and about $30 million of that was directly or indirectly spent on politics, such as doing data analysis.
Click here to watch our documentary on George Soros and how he charted his path to power. He might even be more influential than the Koch brothers.